In a small village hidden at the foot of the Barisan Mountains, lives a man named Reza. Reza is a writer of history books who has long been obsessed with unrecorded legends. He lives in Jakarta, but after receiving a mysterious letter with no sender, his life changes forever. The letter contains only one sentence: "Search the Tumbal Library in Batu Langit. You will find the truth you have been looking for." The letter kept Reza on edge for weeks. Batu Langit is a mountainous region in West Sumatra that is said to have never been fully explored by humans. There are no maps, no information, and no phone signal. But that's exactly why Reza felt he had to go there. He believed it was where he could write the most important book of his life, a book about forbidden knowledge that academic history has never touched. With a backpack, camera, and notebook, Reza left the capital. He headed to Payakumbuh and hired a motorcycle taxi to a remote village called Suko Tengah. From there, he walked north for 2 days, following a cryptic clue written on the back of a letter. The clues described the direction of sunrise in the shape of a large rock resembling a skull. Reza was not alone. He was accompanied by a local hiker named Harun, who was paid to take him to the last point of the human path. Harun was a quiet man and didn't say much. But before parting ways, Harun said something that Reza would never forget. "If you find an old building made of wood and black stone, don't enter after Maghrib." Reza just chuckled at that. He thought Harun was just making it up, like the other cliched stories on the mountain. But when Reza stepped into the Batu Langit area alone, he began to feel a different air enveloping his body. The fog descended slowly even though it was not yet noon. The smell of wet soil and old wood stabbed his nose. The wind rustled, but did not bring coolness. Reza kept walking until he found a building hidden behind a small cliff. The building was exactly as described: old wood, black stone walls with a large door carved with crying faces. Above it hung a small bell that didn't ring even in the wind. Reza stood in front of the building for almost 10 minutes. He felt like he was being watched, but curiosity was stronger than fear. He pushed the door slowly and went inside. The room was dark. The smell of mold and old paper greeted him. Bookshelves towered high, like the walls of a prison. She turned on her flashlight and saw that the books had no titles. All the covers were plain black. Some of them were even bound with spiked rattan ropes. Reza opened one book and found that it was written in an unfamiliar font. They looked like ancient symbols dancing on paper. But when he reached the second page, his ears suddenly buzzed. It was as if there was a whispering voice coming from inside his head, not outside. "Pay with life, get light," the voice said. Reza dropped the book in panic. He thought it was just a hallucination. But when he looked at the wall, he realized one thing. The wall was covered in carvings of babies. A crying baby, a baby with its head upside down, a baby with a nail in its head. Reza took a few steps back and bumped into something. Someone was standing behind him. An old man with his eyes covered by a white cloth and his body wrapped in a red robe. "Why did you come to this place without bringing a sacrifice?" The man's voice was hoarse and heavy. Reza couldn't say anything. The old man didn't wait for an answer. He raised his hand, and instantly the bookshelves shook violently. Books fell one by one, pages flying like blackbirds. Reza ran out of the library as fast as he could. But when he got out, he realized it was already dark. The sky had turned blood red, and the bell above the door finally rang. It was loud and long, as if signaling the start of something terrible. Reza fell to the ground. From inside the library, he heard a baby crying. It was not one cry, but many. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Then a voice, cold, flat, and angry, spoke from behind the door. "You've opened the gate, Reza. Someone will have to die for the guards to sleep again." Reza tried to stand up, but his body seemed frozen. His hands trembled. His knees couldn't support his body. He wanted to scream, but his throat was dry. And when he looked back, the man in the red robe was gone. All that remained was a book, open to the last page. There was one sentence written in the very clear Indonesian: "The sacrifice is not complete. Take the next baby." 3 days had passed since Reza escaped from the cursed library. He hid in a small cave that he found not far from the location. Even in daylight, the surroundings were somber. The birds weren't chirping. There was no sound of the forest as usual. And strangest of all, Reza couldn't find his way out. Every time he followed the direction of the compass or the position of the sun, he always returned to the starting point. The skull-shaped boulder seemed to be the center of an invisible maze. He ran out of food and there was only half a bottle of water left. But the real fear was not hunger. It was the sound of a baby crying every night. The cries echoed, and sometimes they sounded very close. Sometimes Reza felt like a baby was crawling on his chest while he slept. But every time he opened his eyes, there was no one. Until one night, Reza had a dream. In his dream, he saw a young woman with long hair covering her face, hugging a baby tightly. The woman cried, then whispered softly to Reza, "Please, he will be taken." When Reza woke up, he realized something. In his jacket pocket was an old photograph, a picture of a baby in white clothes with a name written on the back. Ardian, born 1983, Suko Tenga. Reza had never carried that photo before. He was convinced that something from the library had connected him to a tragic, unfinished story. And the only clue was the name of the village he had passed through. Suko Tenga. With his remaining strength, Reza tried to head back south. Somehow, that morning, he managed to find a way out. He returned to the village of Suko Tenga, which now seemed quieter and more closed off than before. People looked at him with suspicious eyes. Some closed the doors of their houses as soon as they saw him. But Reza did not give up. He knocked on the door of an old house on the edge of the village, owned by an old man he had spoken to before the hike. The grandfather's name was Mr. Carmen. Mr. Carmen was reluctant to open his mouth at first. But after Reza showed him a photo of the baby, Mr. Carmen's face immediately turned pale. With a trembling voice, he began to tell the story. "That child, Ardian, he is the son of our village midwife. When he was born, at night we often heard the sound of bells from the hill. Then when Ardian was 3 days old, he disappeared." Reza swallowed. He knew this story was no coincidence. Mr. Carmen continued, "Many other babies have gone missing since then, son. Always when the moon is dark and always after the bells. The village called it the night of the summoning, the night when the guardian of the library asked for a new sacrifice. And according to local legend, the library was not built by mere mortals. It is said that it used to be a repository of black magic belonging to a powerful king who wanted to live forever. To keep the books alive, an innocent life was needed, a newborn baby." Reza began to understand. The library was not just a place, it was an entity. It was alive, and it was hungry. But the one thing that made Reza's blood run cold was Mr. Carmen's last statement. "Our village made peace with that a long time ago. That's why there are no children here now." Reza realized, in all his time in Sukotenga, he had never seen a single child. There were no crying sounds, no toys, no laughter. And to make matters worse, according to Mr. Carmen, every baby born in this village will be automatically registered. It would be recorded by the library, and if it is not sacrificed when the time comes, then the whole family will be wiped out, stricken from existence. Reza asked, "In that case, why didn't anyone fight back?" Mr. Carmen just laughed bitterly. "They have. In 1983, Ardian's father tried to escape, took his baby out of the village, never came back. The next day, everyone who knew him forgot who they were. His name was erased. Even his mother didn't remember giving birth to him." Reza didn't know whether to believe it or not, but that night he had another dream. The long-haired woman reappeared. This time she pointed at Reza and said softly, "You opened the gate. Now you must return it." Reza woke up with his breath catching. Next to him, out of nowhere, lay a black book, and on the first page it read, "The next sacrifice, a baby of guardian blood." Reza closed the book quickly, but outside the window of Mr. Carmen's house, the sound of bells could be heard, slowly, over and over again, like the song of death preparing to come. Reza realized something. The library wasn't done with him yet, and the only way to stop it was to return to that place. But this time, not just as a writer, but as the ultimate sacrifice. Reza stood again at the foot of Batulangan, the place where it all began. This time there was no confusion. There was no map, no errand, and no questions. There was only one goal: to end the ritual that had claimed countless lives. He carried the black book in his hands, which now seemed heavier than ever. With every page she opened, the air around her grew colder. The evening sky turned dark even before the sun had completely set. He knew that tonight was the night of summoning, and the library was hungry. The baby's cries started before Reza arrived at the old wooden building, but this time he wasn't trembling. He had accepted a harsh reality. Only the one who opens the gate can close it again. Reza's steps were steady as he pushed open the library door. The sound of old hinges groaning greeted him. The bookshelves had not changed. The smell of mold and old blood still permeated the air. But now the library welcomed him like an old house waiting for its owner to come home. In the center of the room stood a stone altar with carvings that pulsed softly as if alive. Reza opened the last page of a black book. There were written instructions. Sacrifice the blood of the name holder so that the book no longer demands life. He didn't fully understand what this meant, but on the side of the altar, he saw a small mirror, dusty and cracked. As he cleaned it, Reza saw his own face and the figure behind it. A baby, not crying, not smiling, just staring. The baby just appeared. It stood on the floor, its body pale as wax, but its eyes, they were pitch black and deep, like the pits of hell. Reza took a step back, but the baby raised his hand, pointing at Reza's chest. Then in a guttural voice that could not have come from such a small body, he said, "You carry a lost name." Reza was confused, but as he flipped through the pages of the black book again, he found a new entry. Reza Maulana, grandson of Ayang Bayu, first guardian lineage. His blood froze. He knew from his father's story that Ayang Bayu had disappeared while meditating in Sumatra. He was never found. Reza thought it was just a family tale, but now it all made sense. He was a direct descendant of the library's first guardian, and because of that, his blood could seal the ritual. He stood in front of the altar. He picked up the old dagger that lay on the side of the stone. His hand trembled, but before he cut his own skin, the woman's voice from his dream came back. "Not you, but your new blood." Reza fell silent. He looked down. He looked at his reflection. Then slowly, he realized the woman in the dream was his biological mother, and the baby she saw earlier was herself. She was dealing with a shadow from the past, and the library wasn't just alive, it held memories and vengeance. Reza looked around the room. Suddenly, all the walls were filled with the faces of the babies he had seen before. But now their faces seemed to be melting, peeling, grinning. They were crying, screaming, then laughing, and all of them said in unison, "Close the gates, Bloodguard, or let us out." Reza knew this was not an option. If he didn't perform the ritual tonight, then all the entities in the library would be freed, and the outside world would be destroyed. But just as he was about to scratch his skin, the baby shook his head. It pointed to the corner of the room, where a small box was covered with a red cloth. Reza opened it slowly. Inside was a small bottle filled with a blackish liquid, and a scrap of writing, "Last blood of the first baby." Reza understood. It was not his blood that had to be sacrificed, but the blood legacy of the first baby who had been used as a sacrifice. He took the bottle and poured it onto the altar. As the blood touched the carved stone, red light flashed from every side of the room. The sound of a baby crying turned into a long howl. The bookshelves burned one by one. But strangely, the fire was cold, like fog, like ice water. The library moaned as if it was dying a slow death. And from behind the flames, small figures appeared, the shadows of the babies, now smiling. They approached Reza, touched his hand, and one by one, disappeared. Reza fell limply to the floor. The library began to collapse, but it didn't fall on him. The space seemed to lead him out quietly. As Reza stepped out, dawn was breaking on the horizon. The bell above the door no longer rang. The building disappeared into the mist as if it had never existed. He returned to the village, and for the first time, he heard the sound of children's laughter in the distance. On the village street, children were running around holding a ball. Their faces were bright, no longer haunted. Mr. Carmen smiled at Reza. "Are you done?" he said softly. Reza just nodded. He knew that the black book had burned along with the library, but the memory of that place would never go away. A few weeks later, Reza returned to Jakarta. He wrote a book, not about history, but about the dark legacy of humanity. The book was never published, but he kept it for the next generation who might rediscover the sound of bells from the mountains. And on certain nights, when it rains and the power goes out, Reza sometimes still hears the sound of a baby crying from the corner of his room. Not a threat, just a reminder. That knowledge always comes with a price, and not all books are worth reading.